I was setting the table when he told me to add one more plate because she was coming too. He said it casually, like it had always been the plan. I remember pausing with a glass in my hand, trying to recall if I had invited her or if he had. It didn't feel strange enough to question. She had been around more often lately. It made sense. I added the plate. That was the night I remember most clearly now, even though nothing obvious happened. We ate, we talked about work, she told a long story about her coworker that didn't really go anywhere, and he laughed in a way that felt slightly delayed, like he was watching her more than listening. At the time, I just thought he was being polite. I had introduced them a few months earlier. It wasn't even a formal introduction. We were at a cafe, and she stopped by unexpectedly. I waved her over, told her to sit with us, said, "This is him, this is her," and that was it. It felt easy. I liked when the people I cared about got along. After that, she started showing up more. At first, it was through me. She would ask if I was free, and I would say yes, and somehow he would be there too. Or he would suggest we invite her. It felt like things were expanding, not shifting. There wasn't a moment where it felt wrong, just small things. A few weeks later, I noticed they had a way of continuing conversations that I didn't remember starting. She would bring up something he had said, and I would try to place when that had happened. He would respond without explaining, like they had already covered the context. I told myself I probably just wasn't paying attention. Around that time, my schedule changed. I had longer hours, more early mornings. I stopped staying out late as often. When they asked if I wanted to join them for something spontaneous, I started saying no more easily. It didn't feel like I was stepping back. It felt like I was just busy, but they adjusted quickly. They didn't stop seeing each other just because I wasn't there. At first, it still included me. He would tell me he was grabbing coffee with her, or she would mention they ran into each other. It all sounded accidental, unplanned. Then the language changed. He stopped mentioning it unless I asked. She started saying things like we instead of you and him. I noticed, but I didn't react. I've always been the kind of person who prefers to understand something fully before saying anything. I don't like guessing out loud. So I watched. I paid attention to timing. There was a pattern to when he would be unavailable. It didn't line up with work. He would say he had something to finish, but he wouldn't be at home. When I asked casually, he would give answers that were technically clear, but didn't actually explain anything. She had patterns too. She would disappear for a few hours and come back with stories that felt slightly incomplete, like there were parts missing that didn't quite fit into what she was telling me. None of it was enough on its own, but together, it started to form something. One night, I was at his place, sitting on the edge of his bed while he was in the shower. His phone lit up on the desk. I wasn't looking for anything. I didn't pick it up immediately. I remember just glancing at the screen because the light caught my attention. Her name was there. The message was short. Something about earlier, and how she couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I put the phone back exactly where it was. When he came out, I acted the same. We talked about dinner, about a show we were watching, about something his coworker had said. He didn't mention her. That night, I went home and wrote everything down, not because I needed proof for anyone else, just for myself. I wanted to see it clearly, outside of my head. Dates, times, small details. When I finished, it looked less like a suspicion and more like a pattern. A few days later, she told me she was tired because she had stayed up late talking to someone. She said it lightly, like it wasn't important. I asked who. She hesitated for a second, then said a name that wasn't his. It was a small pause, but it confirmed something for me. After that, I stopped trying to make sense of their explanations. I already understood what was happening. I just hadn't decided what to do about it yet. I didn't confront them. There wasn't a reason to. Not yet. Instead, I adjusted. I became less available in a more deliberate way. I declined plans earlier. I stopped initiating. When they invited me, I sometimes said yes, but I left sooner than I normally would. I watched what happened when I wasn't there. They didn't slow down. If anything, they moved closer. I started noticing how comfortable they were together when they thought no one was paying attention. The way they stood slightly closer than necessary. The way conversations between them didn't require effort. It wasn't new anymore. It was established. That was when I made a decision. If I confronted them too early, they would deny it, or minimize it, or turn it into something unclear. Secrets are easy to protect when they're still forming. So I did the opposite. I gave them space. I started creating opportunities for them to be alone together, but in ways that felt natural. Group plans where I arrived late or left early. Suggestions that they should go ahead without me if I was busy. I made it easy. They took it. At some point, they stopped pretending around each other, even if they still pretended around me. I remember one evening when we were all at a restaurant. I had stepped away to take a call. When I came back, they were sitting closer than before, heads slightly tilted toward each other, talking in a way that didn't include the rest of the table. When they noticed me, they adjusted, but not quickly enough. I didn't react. I sat down and continued like nothing had happened. Around that time, their communication changed again. They became more careful with me, but less careful overall. The confidence that comes from not being questioned started to show. They weren't hiding as much as they were before. That made everything easier. I didn't need to search for anything. It was all visible if you knew what to look for. A few weeks later, I saw the messages. This time, I opened them. It wasn't a single conversation. It was a pattern of conversations, ongoing, layered, familiar. There was no moment where it started, which meant it had been happening longer than I thought. I didn't read everything. I didn't need to. I already knew. That night, I didn't feel anything dramatic. No shock, no anger that needed to be expressed immediately. It was more like a quiet confirmation of something that had already settled in my mind. After that, my role changed. I stopped being the person in the middle. I became the observer outside of it. I still saw them. I still spoke to them. But I wasn't participating in the same way anymore. I let them build whatever it was they thought they were hiding. Because the more they built it, the harder it would be to keep it contained. Secrets can exist for a while, but relationships have patterns, and patterns expand. They started depending on each other more. I could see it in the way they reacted to small things. If one of them was unavailable, the other would shift. Their moods started aligning in ways that didn't involve me anymore. It wasn't just something they were doing occasionally. It had become something they relied on. That's when things started to change, not because of me, because of them. They began to make mistakes, small inconsistencies at first, overlapping explanations, times that didn't match, stories that didn't fully connect. I didn't point any of it out. I just let it accumulate. One afternoon, she told me she hadn't seen him in a few days. That same evening, he mentioned something they had done together recently. Neither of them realized the overlap. I said nothing. That was the beginning of it unraveling. Not all at once. Gradually. They started questioning each other in small ways. I could see it in their tone, in the way they paused before responding, in the way their explanations became slightly more detailed than necessary. Guilt doesn't always show up as something obvious. Sometimes it shows up as over-explaining. Around that time, I stepped back even more. I stopped being part of their shared spaces entirely. No more group dinners, no more casual plans. If they wanted to see each other, they had to do it without the structure I had created. And they did. But without that structure, things became less controlled. They had more to manage, more to keep track of, more chances to slip. Eventually, other people started noticing. Not because I said anything, because their behavior changed. They were more distracted, less consistent. Conversations didn't line up the way they used to. It reached a point where they couldn't maintain the same version of the story with everyone. That's when it surfaced. Not in a dramatic way, not in a single moment, but in a series of realizations that connected for different people at different times. I wasn't there when it fully came out, I didn't need to be. By then, it wasn't mine to handle. I had already stepped out of it. He tried to talk to me after. He said he wanted to explain. I listened. He said things that sounded like he had spent time thinking about how to say them, that it wasn't supposed to happen, that it became something before he realized it. I didn't interrupt. When he finished, I told him I already knew. I didn't explain how long. I didn't explain what I had seen. There was no reason to. She reached out too. She said she didn't know how to tell me, that she didn't want to hurt me. I read the message once. Then I put my phone down. I didn't respond immediately. When I did, I kept it simple. I told her I understood, and that was true. Not in the way she meant, but in the way that mattered to me. After that, I didn't stay in contact with either of them, not because I needed distance to heal, but because there was nothing left to understand. Everything had already been clear for a while. The situation didn't end because I exposed it. It ended because it couldn't sustain itself anymore. Too many inconsistencies, too many overlapping versions of the truth. They didn't fall apart because of one moment. They fell apart because of everything they had built on top of something unstable. A few months later, I heard they weren't speaking anymore. I didn't ask why. I could guess. Relationships that start in secrecy don't always survive being seen, especially when the people in them aren't aligned in what they're willing to admit. Now, when I think back to that night with the extra plate, it doesn't feel like a mistake. It feels like the beginning of something that needed to happen exactly the way it did. I introduced them, I made it easy, and when I understood what that created, I didn't try to control it. I let it become what it was always going to be. I didn't catch them. I let them become something they couldn't hide.